Production of Immense Possibilities is made possible by the generous support of the Whole Systems Foundation, advancing well-designed projects that conserve resources and reduce waste and chemical pollution. Asante, providing comprehensive quality healthcare services in a compassionate manner to Southern Oregon and Northern California. Road Co-ops, a community-centered collaboration between the Ashland Food Co-op, the Grange Co-op, Road Credit Union, and the Medford Food Co-op. The Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Events Center, Elizabeth York, and these additional members of the Immense Possibilities Community Builders Circle.
She saw Doug make his way around the floor talking to different children and saying things to them like, "I know I'm dying, do you know you're dying?" And they would say, "Yes, I wonder why our parents don't know."
Well, when he first died, I felt nothing but love to him, and I actually told my mom that he was my favorite parent, which I didn't realize how hard that was for her to hear from me.
If I could talk to you one last time, I would tell you about my plans for my future. What should I do about college, and how do I know when I'm actually ready to marry someone? I would ask you why I wasn't good enough to keep you alive by myself.
And the more we are weighed down by grief, the more, in a sense, we shut the heart off to the sorrows of the world. And we can't afford that right now.
It's not really fun to talk about death and how it happened, but still it helps you connect, and it helps you realize it's not going to be horrible forever, you know.
Welcome to our weekly visit with people who are creating immense possibilities for healthy communities and solutions to all kinds of challenges. One thing people find in healthy communities is solid support through some of life's roughest passages, especially the loss of those dearest to them. The groups and volunteers we'll meet tonight can't prevent the profound grief that's part of life, but they can help thousands of people through to the other side. That's what they do.
I like to come here because it makes me feel better about my dad.
You know, the only thing in life that is fully guaranteed is death. There's the saying death and taxes, but not everybody pays taxes. 80% of the children that we see at the Dougy Center have experienced the death of their father or their mother. The other 20% have experienced the death of a brother or sister, or in the case of teens, a close friend. It forces you to focus on what really matters, and what really matters is relationships, and friendships, and community and love.
The Dougy Center in Portland has been helping grieving children and families refocus on what matters for 30 years now, and has helped spread this work all over the world. It's a pleasure to welcome to Immense Possibilities its coordinator of children's grief services, Jana DeCristofaro. Jana, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here.
Tell us the story of the beginnings of the Dougy Center.
The Dougy Center was founded by a woman named Bev Chappell back in 1982. And she was friends with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who was one of the founders and pioneers in the field of death and dying. And Elizabeth knew a young boy named Doug Turno, who had an inoperable brain tumor. And when Doug came to Portland, Oregon for some treatment at Dornbecker Hospital, she asked Bev if she would meet with Doug and his family. And over the course of time that Bev spent with Doug up at Dornbecker, she realized that even though at that time it was common for doctors and parents to keep information from children about their prognosis, that the children knew. They knew what was happening for them. They knew that they were sick. They knew that many of them were dying. And Bev watched at night as the doctors left and the parents went home to their hotels. She saw Doug make his way around the floor talking to different children and saying things to them like, "I know I'm dying, do you know you're dying?" And they would say, "Yes, I wonder why our parents don't know." And he would ask them, "Do you think you'll make it long enough to go to the prom? Do you think you'll make it long enough to kiss someone?" And that's when Bev had the realization that kids do so well talking with one another, that they find so much help and support from each other. And so from that is where she got the inspiration to start holding grief support groups for kids and teens who had had a parent or a sibling die.
Could it be that the problems that many of us as adults have in talking about death actually makes it harder for children?
I do think it's really challenging for kids because they're so aware of how the adults in their life respond to them when they ask questions about death, when they have thoughts and feelings around that. And so they learn to not ask questions. They learn to not talk to the adults in their life. And so they find a lot of comfort in talking with other kids who are going through something similar, other kids who won't act as if there's something wrong with them, and they won't be weird when they say, my dad died. Oh yeah, my mom died too. They get to talk with one another. They get to use our different creative expression rooms. They get to play. They get to do art. They get to use a room we have called the volcano room, where there's padded floors, padded walls, and they can throw bears around and use up a lot of their big energy. And so they have a chance to be with one another and talk about who's died in their life, talk about the things that they remember, talk about how their lives have changed.
Now, in a way, that sounds like fairly straightforward, simple work. What is the source of its power? How is it that it transforms people?
The concept of I'm not alone, someone understands me, and I don't have to do this by myself. I think those are three really powerful things. Grief is such an isolating experience for people. For a lot of kids, after they have someone die, they go to school and they feel like there's almost a letter hanging around their neck saying, I'm the child whose dad died. And people forget that they're kids who have other things happening in their world. And when they come to the Dougy Center, they're not the only one. They get to look up when they're playing foosball and realize every other child at this foosball table has had someone die too, and it's gonna be okay.
The Dougy Center has really just been helpful for me because one of the hardest things is not being able to talk about it because, it's kind of an awkward subject for some people and they don't really like to talk about it. So when you come here, you're just around a lot of people who understand you and, they let you talk and they listen.
It's not really fun to talk about death and how it happened, but still it helps you connect and it helps you realize it's not going to be horrible forever,
Jana, you've been joined by a friend. Would you introduce us?
Happy to. This is Tiffany Assenberg, who's been a participant in one of our teen groups for about a year and a half now.
Tiffany, it's a pleasure to welcome you, to have you here on the show. Thanks for coming. Would you tell us just a little bit about your experience that brought you to the Dougy Center?
Initially, I didn't want to come to the Dougy Center. I was really afraid. My father had just committed suicide, and I didn't want to be seen as being odd or weird. My mom had told me it was counseling, and it scared me. I didn't want to go to counseling. The first time I went to Dougy Center, I tried to be strong, but that shortly failed. And I cried almost the whole time I got there because I finally felt like I was understood rather than being the broken girl like I had been at school. And it was really nice to be able to sit down with people, and they were so accepting and so warm, welcoming.
How did the experience change you? How are you different now than when you first came to the center?
Before I came to the Dougy Center, I was known at my school as the broken girl. I couldn't really get much done. And people started rumors about me and they kind of ridiculed me. And now that I went to the Dougy Center, I'm actually the student body president at my high school and I'm really involved in the community. And I finally got a part-time job and I work at the VA hospital and I finally feel like I'm a whole person.
Were people cruel to you about your father's suicide?
People were really cruel. And I think mostly it was because suicide is so hush-hush. People aren't comfortable talking about it and people don't understand. A lot of people initially came to me asking, well, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with your family? Why would he do it? Because people don't quite understand the reality and the severity of depression and then suicide. And people don't understand that it's normal and that it could really happen to anybody. I think of you when I'm lonely and need someone to talk to. I knew I could always trust you with the things on my mind and the deepest worries of my heart. At night, when the craziness of the day is finally too much to handle, and I'm in a safe place in the silence and safety of my room, I can finally let loose and talk to you as if you're still really there. I can finally get mad at you and tell you what I actually think of your choice to leave us. I know life was too hard for you in the end, but I still don't accept that as an excuse. Dad, you always taught me to stand up for what I believe in and not let anyone put me down or change what I think or have to say. I am strong and powerful. What I had to experience with your death is unfortunate, but now God has given me the chance to change others' lives. If I can save one person's life as a result of knowing the signs of suicide, that is what I plan to do. If I could talk to you one last time, I would tell you about my plans for my future. What should I do about college, and how do I know when I'm actually ready to marry someone? I would ask you why I wasn't good enough to keep you alive by myself. Some things only a father can tell me and warn me about, and I wish I would have spent more time asking you the questions I never will get the opportunity to ask you now that you're gone. I know I might not always remember your voice or your laugh or your facial expressions, but as I get older, I will forever remember to live as you taught me to. Be strong and witty, but respectful and understanding. Daddy, you are my superhero, my idol, but most of all, you are my best friend.
And to make that video, it was almost like a burden had been lifted off my heart in a way, where I could finally tell my dad how I was really feeling. And I could finally accept that I was finally healing. It had been almost a year. And I finally felt that I could share my story with other people to heal them, not so much share my story to heal myself.
And in fact, you went on to start something at your high school. Would you tell us about that?
Me and my sister now have a suicide prevention and awareness seminar that we give all of the freshmen every year. And it's required to graduate. So we teach them the signs of depression and the signs of suicide and how to help. And we also get to show our videos. And it's really inspiring because I've had people come to me and say, you know, if it wasn't for you and if it wasn't for knowing, my friend could be dead, or I myself could be dead.
You know, there was something that you said in the video along the lines of your pain that you weren't enough to keep your father alive. What is your feeling about that now?
Now that I know myself more about depression, more about suicide, and even more about my dad's childhood, I'm starting to realize that I couldn't have kept him alive myself. And even if I would have tried to help him get help, he probably wouldn't have ever made it, just because he didn't have the determination to get himself help. And if I can't help my dad in a way to make him stay alive, that's not my fault. And I've let go of a lot of the guilt that I had associated with my dad's death because of that.
What's the immense possibility of the work that you do, Jana?
I still think there's something really powerful about kids coming together with other kids their own age who've all had someone die that aren't necessarily part of their family, where they can talk openly about things that maybe are too hard to talk about at home, and just relax and be regular kids with one another. So in my immense possibility, it would be that kids who have had someone die would have access to a place like the Dougy Center. Just know that if you're out there and you're watching this, that there is hope for you and that you can do great things. You will no longer be the broken person that they said that you were.
Tiffany, you are an amazing young woman, and I'm really glad you joined us on Immense Possibilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jana Krista DeFaro, thank you very much for the work that you're doing, for bringing Tiffany to us, and for visiting with us on Immense Possibilities.
Thank you, Jeff, so much for the opportunity.
When you don't go to the Dougy Center, it feels like you're all trapped in this bubble where no one else is inside. And when you hear what the other people say, it kind of makes you feel kind of better. I think coming to Dougy Center is nice to know that you're not the only one who has a parent die. There's a whole bunch of people in the bubble.
And this same work is going on strong in Southern Oregon, thanks to a vital group called Winter Spring. Joining me now is Winter Spring's Executive Director, Julie Lockhart. Julie, welcome to Immense Possibilities.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
How is your work at Winter Spring alike and different from the Dougy Center in Portland?
Well, we are a peer-to-peer support model like the Dougy Center, and so we have trained facilitators. And so in the children's program, we get the kids together in Kid Time in Medford, and we've also had a facility in Ashland where we had kids. And so what we do is we do the group support and activities, art activities and things like that. And then we also do programs with teens in the middle and high schools in Jackson County. And again, we're doing, a teenage grief curriculum and modeling it on that peer-to-peer support process.
Can you give us any tips about what to look for in grieving teens and children to find when they're really in trouble?
Yeah. So a lot of their behaviors may look like typical kid behaviors, so you have to really watch for things like changes. But there may be some acting out behaviors, there may be some recurring illnesses. They might have, stomach aches all the time. With teens, you may have some risk-taking behaviors. They may become sullen or not talk. Those are the kinds of things that you want to really watch out for. So my daughter and I lost her dad when she was 6. And when she was 10, we moved from Bellingham, Washington to here. And there were all sorts of kind of strange behaviors that were going on with her that I didn't realize were grief. I didn't know at the time. I wasn't part of Winter Spring, and now I know.
And what can adults do to help these kids?
Regardless, whether it's a teacher, a parent, or a friend of the family, it's really important to establish a rapport with them, to, especially little kids, make them feel safe and loved, to do reflective listening with them so they really feel heard. With teens, you've got to establish a rapport and get them talking about the things that are important to them.
And within that first night, they came together as a group of kids that didn't know each other at all, and opened up in a way I could have never imagined in the first meeting.
Because kids bring an honesty to the process.
Like, I know that I'm not the only person on earth that had this happen.
Julie Lockhart and I are now joined by Emma Durbin, a sophomore at Ashland High School and an active volunteer at Winter Spring. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you.
And I understand, Julie, you two know each other pretty well?
Yes, this is my daughter.
Emma is your daughter. Really nice to have you here. Emma, you experienced a really important death at a young age. What happened, and how did you experience? What was it like for you?
Well, I lost my father, and he was on a trip to Mexico. I wasn't able to process it the same way that teens and adults can at that age. But one of the main things I remember is I would always wish that he would just come back and it was some cruel joke that people were playing on me.
How was it as you grew up a little and got to be a teen? Your mom said there were some pretty rough times that she didn't recognize as grief when you first got here. What was going on for you?
Well, I didn't recognize anything as grief either. I was still too young to process it or realize that I was processing it. I thought I was done with it. But mostly I was just shy and scared of people, and if I had something like this when I was little, I feel like I would have been more able to trust other kids and learn how to talk to them.
So you went to Winter Spring yourself?
Yes, I realized what was going on with me and that now I was able to think through it mentally and think about everything that was wrong with my life up until that point. And it felt so much of a relief to get it all out, because whenever I tell people about losing my father, they always seem so, like, they feel sorry for me, and sometimes it's just overwhelming.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because it strikes me that it's awkward for a lot of people to deal with people who've had a great loss. Even very well-intentioned people, we don't know what to say, we're afraid we're going to say the wrong thing. There's just this thick feeling where we don't feel very resourceful sometimes. What would you say to people who say, I just stay away from that because I don't know what to say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, the first thing you have to remember is it has nothing to do with you when you're trying to comfort someone. So you can't start talking about all the problems you have to try to empathize with them. You just have to let them talk. And also, saying should makes them feel pressured. You should never say should.
In terms of what you can do for people is just listen. They want to talk about the loss often, and it's really important that you don't try and fix it. You can't. So the best thing I've learned to say is, I can't imagine what you're going through right now.
And you're working now as a volunteer at Winter Spring, Emma.
Yes, I am.
What do you do there?
I've helped with the high school group that I'm currently working on now, and I helped with the elementary school group last year, as well as I've helped with the training programs and telling people in our volunteer trainings about teen grief, because it's really hard to understand, and even I don't understand it sometimes, and I'm a teenager, so I just feel like it's really rewarding.
Emma, what are your feelings about your father today, and how are they different from when he first died?
Well, when he first died, I felt nothing but love to him, and I actually told my mom that he was my favorite parent, which I didn't realize how hard that was for her to hear from me. But now I've realized that he was a normal person, and it could have happened to anyone, but it happened to me, so it's my job to deal with it. And What I'm doing with it now is trying to make my life better from it and become a better person.
Is there anything that you think people need to understand about grief and loss?
I think they need to understand that it happens to everyone at some point in their life, and it's unique every time to every person. Even if someone's gone through 3 or 5 different deaths, it's different every time.
Julie, what are the opportunities for volunteers who'd like to get involved at Winter Spring?
Our program thrives on volunteers, and volunteers run our groups and they get training. So what we're looking for is people to come take our training, and specifically the specialized groups, it's really important to have people who have that particular loss. So for suicide loss, for example, if the facilitator has a suicide in their life, then they have much more credibility than having somebody who doesn't. And so if a bereaved parent group is led by somebody who's lost a child, then they have much more credibility. And we also need some help, of course, with our teen and children programs all the time.
Well, I am delighted that you both came on the show. This is such important, so universal, and so basic and so important, and something that we dance around without really confronting often until we have to. So Julie Lockhart of Winter Spring, thank you so much for coming on. Emma Durbin, thank you for coming on. Thanks for telling your story. It means a lot to us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff.
The grief work, I think, is essential, because without that processing of the accumulated sorrows, we begin to harden the heart. And I mean, it's interesting to note that one of the primary causes of death in this culture is congestive heart failure. And our hearts are congested.
That's psychotherapist and author Francis Weller, who's dedicated his practice to broadening our understanding of grief as a core human experience that extends well beyond the focused pain at the loss of a loved one. Like our other guest, Francis is not in the business of averting grief, but rather helping to guide people through it to fuller and more centered lives. Francis, welcome to Immense Possibilities. It's very good to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Jeff.
Many people keep their grief a private matter, even think that it's not appropriate to share. You're quite emphatic that it is properly understood a communal activity. Would you talk more about that?
Well, grief, if we look at our long history as a species, grief has always been communal. It has never been private. It has always been a process that we collectively address, whether it's the death of someone close to us or, any shift in the vitality or the integrity of the village would be addressed through communal practices. Only very recently in our modern society have we fragmented this collective process into a very private one. We've privatized almost everything in this culture, from our emotions to our property to everything else. And restoring it back to its communal root is something that is so profoundly healing to the soul. We are saturated as a culture in sorrow. And so I think we're beginning to crack the denial around that, and that's a good thing. I think it's beginning to shift and allowing all of us to begin to acknowledge these losses.
Ultimately, why do you do this work, Francis?
Well, I think the biggest piece for me is that we need men and women whose hearts are not encumbered by excessive loss and grief, because those grief pieces that we do not address become oppressive, and they weigh us down. And the more we are weighed down by grief, the more, in a sense, we shut the heart off to the sorrows of the world. And we can't afford that right now. We need mature men and mature women who have processed their sorrow so that their heart can stay fluid and flexible and responsive to the planet, to our communities, to the salmon, to our children. We need these people. We need all of us to be able to have a heart that's reflective and responsive.
Francis, what's the immense possibility of the work that you do?
There's a phrase of William Blake where he said, "The deeper the sorrow, the greater the joy." I think when we live with a lot of unacknowledged sorrow, our capacity to acknowledge joy is greatly diminished. And I think we came here to actually have some delight in this life. I think that is also one of our griefs, is that a lot of the joy, a lot of the delight in this life has been eclipsed by these feelings of unresolved, unmetabolized grief. So the immense possibility is to once again feel alive and to celebrate this very fact that we have been gifted with this brief time here on this planet.
Frances Willer is a psychotherapist and the author of Entering the Healing Ground. Frances, thanks very much for sharing time with us on Immense Possibilities.
It's been a pleasure, Jeff. Thank you.
And that sounds strange to many people, you know, that grief work is so joyful, but it truly is. I know how wonderful it can be when we've gone through the tunnel, we've gone through the darkness, you know, through the winter, and we come out the other side and it's spring.
That's it for tonight's edition of Immense Possibilities. You can find more content, give us ideas and suggestions at immensepossibilities.org. Visit our Facebook page and like and share that. Tell your friends about us. Thanks very much for watching. I'm Jeff Gold, and until next time, please do what you can do. Thanks for watching to learn about tonight's immense possibility. You can watch any of our past programs anytime at immensepossibilities.org.